Welcome back. This is our second installment on celebrating our 100 years of Caterpillar, and we're going to feature today the Caterpillar Model 15. You may have noticed this is gray, so this is the correct color. But this is a PV Series Model 15. This is a 1929 model. There were 7,559 of these manufactured from 1929 to 1932. This particular tractor came out of Colorado, in the state which is in right now, and so we've really hadn't had to do too much to this other than a little carburetor work, which is standard on any gas tractor. Pretty much identical to the 10 except slightly bigger. It weighs 5,790 pounds. The engine is 22 horsepower with 26 at the PTO. The cylinders of course there's 4 cylinders on this model. They're 3 3/4 by 5-inch stroke. Max RPMs like 1,250 RPMs. It does hold more gasoline because a larger engine takes more gas. This is 23 gallons. Track design is pretty much the same as the Caterpillar 10. Slightly larger, of course. Same number of bottom rollers. 2-spring tension on the idlers. The operator station is the same. You've got 1-foot master clutch. You've got 2 steering levers, left and right brake, choke. You got your oil gauges, you have your mag kill switch, and you've got your temperature diversion valve that would shift the exhaust temp from the just straight out the exhaust pipe up to the preheating the intake. Pretty much the same as the 10. The gasoline tank is still above the engine. So if the engine ran real hot, that would tendency to evaporate the gas a little quicker. Radiator's pretty much the same, except this one, of course, has 15 on it.
So I can't help but notice this seat on this tractor looks really, really comfortable. Was this quite similar to what the original one would have looked like?
Yeah, the overall appearance is identical to what the original seat would have looked like, except the original seats were metal spring with horsehair filler on it. This is a more modern foam cushion design and manufactured in Idaho to replicate the original, but there's no horsehair in that.
So where would this tractor have been manufactured? Do you know?
This tractor was manufactured in San Leandro, California.
Now, last tractor model we looked at, number 10, didn't have quite as much shielding, especially around the engine here, as the 15 does. Why? What's the difference, and why the difference?
Well, a lot of the difference is, more than likely, I don't know 100%, but 99% of the time, every tractor that left the factory came with engine side guards. All right, what happens a lot of times is the frequency of maintenance or things the operator chooses to take the side panels off, and they'll stick them in the barn or throw them away, and so they disappear. So what makes them rare today, because a lot of them did disappear over time, but it's a way to keep heavy debris out of the engine. It's louvered, you can tell, to get air in and out. And it would keep branches and whatnot from getting into the tractor. But the Caterpillar 15, like the 10, was designed for drawbar work. You could do it a lot of agricultural applications. Again, you could use it for municipal applications like snow removal. I have seen a few with blades on them. They're not really the best at pushing dirt. It's replacing a team of horses again is the mindset here. So. It's a hand crank, of course. You check your water through your standard radiator cap at that time. But something different about the 15 is Caterpillar is now recognizing the need for improvements at a more faster pace. So like the Caterpillar 10, they made 4,900. This, they made almost double, 7,500. So the demand is becoming more popular for these units, and applications are starting to broaden, therefore the requirement for different tractors. So in a transition period, Caterpillar also made a smaller version of a 15, which we happen to have here. And it's a 7C series, like the PV series, the 7C series. But the thing really unique about this tractor is they only made 307.
Wow.
This is serial number 88. It's very close to the 10 model, but you can notice real quick, what's something you notice is difference between these two other than color?
Well, it's the tank design.
The tank design, yeah, they moved the gas tank away from the top of the engine and moved it to the back of the engine. So this was a much better design, less frequency of the heat from the motor evaporating the gas, safer. You can see the engine design is very similar to the 10 and the PV15, except they lowered the carburetor due to the tank having to be at the rear of the engine. So they put this drop tube in to get the carburetor slightly lower than the tank for gravity-fed applications. It's actually 3 3/8 bore by 4-inch stroke versus 3 3/4 by 5-inch stroke. But again, this is a transition tractor, therefore they didn't make very many of them, and this was moving rapidly into the 20 design. But also, you notice the color difference. This is 1929, which is gray. 1931, they went to all yellow, so this is a yellow tractor.
Now, did the color change? Was that idea pushed by the farmers, the purchasers of the tractor, or was all this development and R&D done on Caterpillar's side?
There's a number of different stories about it. You know, you got to remember in the late 20s, early 30s, road improvement was starting to happen pretty rapidly. So when you had a gray tractor going along a road grading, it's less visible. So one story is that they approached the engineers in production and say, what color do we need to paint it? And a couple ideas were kicked around about orange and silver and other things, and production pretty much put their foot down and says, no, it needs to be all one color. It's too complicated to do two-color tractor, which is true. And so they settled on the yellow. Now, I don't know who made the final decision about, yes, it's yellow, whether it was engineering or the powers that be at the time. But the yellow really has only changed once since 1931, and this is more of a bright yellow, where today's cat yellow is more of a deeper yellow.
Sure. So production may have had a big say in the color, but in terms of like the fuel tank design and other mechanical improvements, was that Caterpillar going and doing field testing, or was it the farmers writing letters and saying, hey, we need to change this here?
Well, that's one thing. More than likely it was a combination.
Okay.
It was Caterpillar doing testing, and then because Caterpillar had such a good dealer network, that it was real easy for a representative of Caterpillar to reach the buyer.
Okay.
So the farmer may have said, hey, we're having these problems, and they decided to make changes. But Caterpillar did a lot of R&D, and that's why they had so many different models, is they were constantly changing.
Right.
So unlike a John Deere where they're making 20, 30,000 of a particular model, they're making less than 10,000, and in this case, less than 307.
You said John Deere wasn't making as many iterations at the time. Was that just because they had already developed their product, their tractor, and Caterpillar was kind of new to this whole game? They're trying to catch up, or?
Well, I mean, John Deere and other producers had a quality product. You know, their biggest difference is they're rubber-tired tractors, and this was a track-type tractor. So Caterpillar was really the forerunner of track-type units available to the common person. So I think that had a lot to do with it. You know, there's a video, I assume it was by Caterpillar, where they took a unit, is actually a 20, and put it on wheels to show the comparison why a wheeled tractor is not as good as a track-type tractor. So they were truly trying to convince the market that this was the way to go.
You said Caterpillar was really good about listening. They had a good dealer network. That's what you said. Is there any company that has anything close to what Caterpillar had back then in terms of a good dealer network, listening to customers, making iterations?
Well, I mean, Caterpillar today still has a real strong a dealer network, but, they realize that people aren't going to call up the factory and order a product. They're going to order something from a guy who came by the farm and said, I've got a product that I think would really suit your needs. And then sometimes they would bring a unit and let the man test it. And once he got on it, they knew he had a customer. They just had to get him on it. So back in the day, it was a matter of, still, you got to remember that the operators that used this equipment not too long ago were using horses and mules. So, a big selling point was this tractor doesn't cost anything when you're not using it. That horse and mule, you still got to feed him, you got to water him, you got to maintain him, even if you're not using him. Here, you just park this in the barn, you forget about it, and you come back, make sure it's got oil, gas, and water, and you're good to go. So it doesn't cost you throughout the year. So a big selling point on the early tractors was the cost per acre or hour was much less than maintaining livestock to do the same type work.
What happened to the livestock that this machine replaced? Do you know? Were they put use in other areas on the farm, or were they just sold to?
Well, in the early days, Best and Holt offered incentives to buy back the livestock.
Really?
If the person purchased the equipment. So,
wow.
Say this is a roughly 22 horsepower. So, if one horse was 1 horsepower, you're replacing 22 horses. Although one horse could do a little more than that. But we'd say that this would replace a team of 5 horses, more than likely, or mules. So they would buy back the livestock in order to motivate the person to buy it.
So there was really no reason not to go over to this newfangled technology, just out of fear of change, really.
Out of fear of change, that was it. A gas-powered unit, this is in the early day of cars and roads too, so when gasoline hit the market, it was used in stationary engines, but not many mobile applications. From a 10 to the PV15 to the 7C15, other than a few minor changes, the basic concepts are the same.
So what's one unique thing about this tractor, would you say?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one, like we discussed, is low production number, so that makes this tractor desirable as a collector. This tractor also has a belt pulley, which you come back here, you'll see. Belt pulleys, you would engage a lever beside the seat that would engage the pulley, and so they could run a belt to a number of different applications. So you could run like a grist mill, a seed cleaner, possibly a small sawmill, water pump, a fruit sprayer, all kinds of things. But this is something that you don't see very often on tractors because it's in a vulnerable spot. So if they were doing a lot of drawbar work, this belt pulley would actually get in the way. So you could remove it and add it back if you needed to. But in the collector world, those are highly desirable.
Would that have come with the tractor, or is that a separate purchase? Is that an add-on?
That was an option that you could order at the time you got the tractor. There's a number of different things you could order. Like similar to the 10 and the 15, you could get a canopy, you could get different track shoes.
Here's another question for you. So I noticed this Caterpillar logo is quite different from the wavy Caterpillar logo. Would this have been accurate?
This was accurate. So again, when they went to change the color from gray to yellow, they got away from the wavy logo. This was a carryover from Holt Manufacturing. Benjamin Holt used this logo on his tractors, and the whole premise of that is a photographer, I think his name was Roger Clements, I'm not sure. They were doing an exhibition of a Holt tractor out in the field.
Yep.
And the photographer was standing beside Benjamin Holt, and he says, "That looks like a Caterpillar going across the field." Well, Benjamin Holt took it as an insult to start with, and the guy explained himself. He said, "No, a Caterpillar can go anywhere it wants to go." And so they coined the term Caterpillar as a designation for the tractor. So you can see the wavy logo here. This still has the wavy logo in the radiator, and they maintain that up until the Caterpillar Model 30, I believe.
Okay.
The 6G series 30.
Which would have been year?
Probably 34, 35.
I know you were talking about some mechanical changes they made from this 15 to that one. Is there a weight difference that kind of?
There is a weight difference. You can tell slightly with them sitting side by side. This one's a little taller. This tractor is at 5,800 pounds, and this one's about 4,500 pounds.
Where did the change in weight come from? Do you know?
The change in weight probably is the undercarriage is slightly different. The engine is a little bit smaller. Transmission is a little bit smaller.
Here's a good question about traction then. So we had a short a while ago, you talked about the tracks a little bit, but would new Caterpillar tractors at the time have come with larger ridges on them?
Goussers?
Yeah, goussers.
Yeah, they wear over time just
Okay.
like everything else because that has in contact with the ground at all times, as
Right.
it travels. So I would have to look in a book to see what the actual height of that would have been originally. But I've seen some that were probably this tall.
Wow.
2 inches.
While we're in the whole different iteration of the tractor, how many engineers do you think were in the plan room drafting up design drawings at a time for a different Caterpillar? Because they didn't have AutoCAD and all the modern tools they have today.
Yeah, well, that's something to think about. I've seen pictures of drafting rooms where they had probably 50 to 100 guys in there drawing parts. Because you got to remember, in manufacturing, there was a drawing for each and every part to produce. Because you had to begin with a casting.
Okay.
And then the casting, when it left the foundry, had to go to the machine shop, and then when it got done machining, had to go to assembly. So there was a lot of hands involved. So, I can imagine there was a stack of papers probably this thick, plats on just the products that were made for this tractor. And again, before computers, so this was all hand-drawn.
Yeah.
Trial and error.
So when they drafted the first draft of a part, would the machinist be working with the engineer really closely, or like how would you begin that iteration process where you have different parts and you've got to draw them all separately, but they have to fit together?
I imagine there wasn't a lot of prototype work done.
Okay.
It was probably pretty limited. I've heard stories of when Best Manufacturing was in production in San Leandro that they had a top secret department where they would do their R&D and whatnot there. So it's possible at this time Cat was doing the same thing where they would go and have engineers build the tractor, test it, prove it, and then break it down and refine it and go into production. They were just moving pretty rapidly, so they had a lot of smart people working for them. I know that, and it's still today. It's, new tractors are tested and drawn on paper or in the computer, so they're able to simulate loads and everything. Back when these were done, the only simulation you had was to get it out and actually work it.
Yep. Now this one appears, and it could just be the fuel tank. This one looks a little bit more rounded. It looks a little bit more artistic, stylish, whatever. Is it really, or is that by design, or is that just a product of moving the fuel tank and changing some designs?
I'm sure it was by design to make it a more sleek or appealing model. This was between the First World War and the Second World War, so the artistic movement really didn't happen until after the war. But
because it was still during the Great Depression.
Yeah, this was not far after the Depression. You wanted a sleek-looking product, so it wasn't boxy looking. Because you've got a 30 right behind it here. You can see there's no sheet metal. There's a lot of exposed components. It's more primitive looking, I guess you could say, versus this here where it's more sleek, modern. Again, they're making improvements. If this was doing orchard work, the branches wouldn't interfere with the engine.
That's a good point.
That type of thing.
So just to be clear, this 15 was manufactured after that particular 30.
Yeah, that's a 1928.
Okay. Well, that would explain the cosmetic changes.
Yeah,
so.
But that was a carryover from Best Design.
Okay.
So Caterpillar Tractor Company didn't make many changes to the 30. They had a 30 and a 60.
That's right, they did. Okay.
So just because they started with a 30 and a 60, they didn't go up from that point.
Going to cosmetic changes, they did move all the gauges and everything to one central spot. I guess they had to because you can't put a hole in your fuel tank to mount
you don't want to put a hole in your fuel tank.
But they consolidated everything.
You'll see that pattern carry on to where they actually bolted a dash per se on the tank to hold the controls, but you still have your temperature control, you got your oil pressure. There's still no water temp gauge on these yet.
Okay.
So if water was boiling out, you'd see it, you know. But you'll see in early publications and advertising for these that they were trying to design a tractor that almost anyone of any age could operate. Because you'll see young people, they'll sit up here on the edge of the seat so their feet can reach the pedal.
Yeah.
Or if an older gentleman or person, you know, they can slide the seat back and able to operate it. So as long as you could reach the pedals, you could operate
That's
it.
right.
So,
well, it's a beautiful tractor. Thank you for showing us.
oh yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and hope you're enjoying this series. And we'll just at the beginning, stay tuned. And if you guys have some questions that we're not covering, be sure and put it in the comments below. We'll try to get those addressed in the models ahead. But
As always, thank you for watching.
and keep kicking tracks.